Welcome to NativeScript Ambassador program for summer 2018. In this presentation, I'm going to make a fast introduction to ECMAScript 6. So what are we going to see? Well, I'm going to talk about declaring variables using let and constants, and then how to declare default parameters for functions, and a new method of creating objects in ECMAScript 6. Then I will speak about destructuring assignment and the rest and spread operators with the 3 dots. Then I will explain the classes in ECMAScript 6 and arrow functions, and finally I will speak about maps and sets classes. So let's start. Well, ECMAScript 6 has just reached its final state, so it's not yet fully supported by every browser, and of course some browser will always be late to this game. Well, for the time being we're using transpilers. So transpilers take ECMAScript 6 source code and generate ECMAScript 5 code that can run in every browser. It even generates the source map files, which allows you to debug directly the ECMAScript 6 source code from browser. At the time of this presentation, there are two main alternatives to transpile ECMAScript 6 code. Tracer, a transpiler made by Google project, and Babel, a project started by a young developer named Sebastian, who's at the time of developing this transpiler had an 17 years old. Interesting. The difference between compiler and transpiler, that transpile is transpiling from one language to another, which is our case for transpiling ECMAScript 6 to ECMAScript 5. Compiler is compiling a code language to the machine language. So let's start with our first example here, declaring variables. So in this presentation, in this example, I'm presenting a code with the old way, the ECMAScript 5. And here we have a function named getFullName. And in this code, we're passing a parameter person, and then there is a condition. We're checking the person. The property is VIP, and then if the person VIP is true, I'm declaring a variable using the reserved word var to declare a variable. This variable is called name. So I'm returning this variable here. Otherwise, I'm returning name. Well, let's think a little bit. Is there a problem with our code? Do you think that the code is going to give an error because we're declaring the variable inside if? So if this condition is false, is return here returning something not even exist? Well, let's try. Let's give true first, and let's try to run our code. So run. Okay, I'm returning the variable with the value Mr. Rashid. Now let me pass a false. And let me run the code again. You see here it's undefined. Well, this is a value. Though it's undefined, but this indicates that the variable name is declared somewhere in the memory, but it's not initialized, and that's why it's returning undefined. So in other words, it's like we're saying, if I declared the variable here at the beginning and used it here, let me run. You see here, it's giving the same exact value. This is because of the behavior of the ECMAScript. the compiler here, the parser of ECMAScript file, actually when it parses the code, it does it in two phases. The first phase, it goes over the code, and then it will allocate a special memory, and it will reserve all the variables in that. It will place the variables in that allocated memory. And it's worth saying that in ECMAScript 5, it's scoped by functions. So for each new function, it will reserve a new memory for the variables and functions. That's why we're having undefined, because the second phase of it will start executing the code, and of course name here is already exist in the memory, and that's why let in ECMAScript 6 came to fill that gap. So again, let me change this and put let here. So let me run the code again. You see, there is no return. Actually, it didn't return any value. Then, because here name is not even exist in the memory. And then if I put true, of course, I'm getting a value. So let in ECMAScript 6 just came to fill the gap, the problem in ECMAScript 5. So the same way for constants. Well, constants behave exactly just like let, but the idea here, when I declare that something, I cannot change its value. So in our example, I'm declaring three constants, three types of constants. The first is number, the second is an object, the third is an array. But be careful here. If I try to change the value of some variable, you see I'm having an error, a syntax error, because I cannot change the value of the variable inside my code. Same thing apply to the other constants, some object and some array, but be careful, this could be tricky, because I can change the content of some object and some array, but I cannot assign it to a new value. So let me give an example here. You see in the first line here, some object dot color, this is the content of some object. I'm trying to give it a value blue, which is completely alright. The second line here, I'm trying to assign it to a new object, and this is not allowed. So the first line is okay, the second is a syntax error. Similarly, for the array, the first line here, SumArray.push, I'm changing the content, so it's okay. Syntactically, it's okay. The second line, SumArray equal to square bracket, so I'm assigning to a new object, which is a syntax error. Okay, now in ECMAScript 6, I can create objects in a simplified way. So in this function here, this function, I'm declaring two variables, then I'm returning that variable, which has two properties, and the key is a name, and then the content is the variable name. Similarly is VIP. Alright, actually I can type this line in simplified way in ECMAScript 6. So let me comment this. And here, let me show you the simplified version. In this version here, if the key of the object I want to return happen to be the same as the name of the variable, then I don't need to write it. It's just enough to say curly bracket name, comma, then the other variable, and this will return an object with the key name and then the content of the name, then the key isVIP with the content of the isVIP variable. So let me run this code and see. Run. So you see here, this line here just return an object with two properties. The first property, it has a key name, just exactly as the same as name as constant, and isVIP here. Okay. Now destructuring assignment. What is destructuring assignment? Let's say, and this is first in ECMAScript 5, I have an object here with two properties. The first property is timeout with value 2000 and is cached to the value true. Let's say after a while in my code I want to declare two variables with a value and assign them to the value of the two properties of that object. So HTTP timeout equal to HTTP option dot timeout, and then HTTP cache equal to HTTP options dot is cache. Well, in ECMAScript 6 I can simplify that assignment here in 2 lines and make it in just 1 line. So let's see how can I do it. So let me comment this and then check here. So this is called destructuring assignment, or I prefer to say it deserializing or mapping a variable. So this is the object. I'm assign it here to an object, and then the key of that object is timeout and is cache, just similar to this and this. And then the declared variables is HTTP timeout and HTTP cache, and this will create 2 variables automatically with name HTTP timeout and HTTP cache with the values of isCache and timeout of the HTTP options. So if I print out this, run, so you see now I have 2 variables separate, just declared from that assignment here. Well, I can even simplify it more. And here well, if it's happened that the variables I want to declare is going to have the same naming of the properties, then I don't need to add them here. Just enough to say timeout, comma, is cache, and this will declare 2 variables with that names and then assign them to those values. So let me run. So you see, okay, great. Now there are 2 concepts in ECMAScript 6, the rest operator and the spread operator. Those always known as the 3 dots operator. Rest operator is always is the output of rest operator for declaring an array variable, while the spread operator, it's all the way around. It takes an array and separates it into entities. So let me explain the first one here. The rest operator, you see, I'm declaring an array persons which has a content Rashid, David, Frank, and Shiva. Then I'm doing this assignment, the destructuring assignment. I'm declaring the first variable first name, comma, and then 3 dots, then rest names. So as we saw before that destructuring assignment, this will declare 2 variables, first name and rest name. But because here I put 3 dots, what's gonna happen? The first name here will take the first value of the array persons, and the rest names will take an array which is the rest of persons without the first name. So let me print out these 2 variables and see the result. Okay, great. So first name is a string variable, Rashid, and rest names just an array with 3 values. Now the spread operator here works just in the reverse way. Here I pass an array and get separate entities. So in our example, I'm declaring a table with 3 values. Then here I use the method min of math, and I pass the array with 3 dots. So this means the array will be break down into entities, 3 entities in our case, and then it would return the minimum value, which will be assigned to the min size variable. So let's try the result, and you see 2 is the assigned value to min size, which is the minimum out of 5, 2, and 10. Okay, now we came to the probably the most important part in ECMAScript 6 comparing with ECMAScript 5. Always developer in ECMAScript 5, the normal JavaScript, complained about not having classes, though there are also ways to declare classes in ECMAScript 5, but it was really cumbersome. You have to declare 2 functions, and it's really out of scope of this fast lecture. But here now, who's familiar with higher languages like Java and C# will find this really easy. So in general, how to declare a class and how to use it in ECMAScript 6. Well, the keyword is class, then with the name of the class, and normally we give a capital letter for the first name of the class. Then this declared class, I can't use it directly in my code. Actually, I should instantiate it. Then I can use the instance copy of that class. The instantiation just happened with the keyword new. So here I'm declaring a variable person with a small letter, and then I equal it to new person. So this variable here actually is an instance of that class. Alright, now you see this class has 2 methods. Normally inside the class we say fields for variables and methods for functions. So in our case I have 2 methods, which means I have 2 functions. So the first method named with a keyword, key reserved word, constructor. You see here this constructor take a variable, then it's assigned to a field. This field is named this.age, and it will be assigned to the parameter passed by the constructor. Okay, the reserved word constructor here inside a class means this method will be executed the moment I instantiate a class. So when I instantiate a class person, this part will be executed. Then here I'm giving it a parameter 5. That means the 5 will be assigned to the field this age. Great. The second method here, to string, actually it's returning that field which is already assigned in the constructor. So I cannot use the method toString directly from the class. It's always could be used by an instance. So in our case here, let me run the code. Run. Okay, great. So now I print person.toString, and that return me the field this age. Now the second concept with classes, as I explained before, all the methods inside a class, I cannot use them directly. Actually, I should instantiate a class, then I can use those methods. Actually, there is an exception. The exception here, if the method of one of the methods for a class just gave a prefix static, then in this case I can directly use the class with that method. So in here, a static default age, so I can say directly person.default age, and I don't need to instantiate it. One thing I want to explain also, the special method get and set, the getter and setter. Actually, the getter and setter methods, I can use them. So they are methods, but I can use them in my code as a fields. What does that mean? Okay, I'm having a field underscore age. It's declared in the constructor. Then in getter, I can get this value, and in the setter, I'm giving it a new value. So how can I use my code here? So as I explained, so here in my code, I'm instantiating the class and then pass a value 20. Then I can use the method getAge directly to get the value. So I say person.age. Then to change the value, I use the setter for assign it to a new value. I say person.age equal to 50. Let me run the code and see the result. Okay, let me run. So great, first it was 20, which is taken by the instantiated value. Then I'm changing it to 50. Finally, I want to talk about inheritance in classes. So what is inheritance? Okay, inheritance, actually sometimes, let's say I have a class animal. Then this class animal, let's say it has a special methods or general methods for all the animals, like the speed of the animals, the average age, etc., etc. So I want to have a class lion, which will inherit everything available, every methods and fields available in animal. Then it will have its own methods as well, and sometimes they can override some methods available in the parent class. Similarly, here I'm having a class, I name it person. It has a method age, and also it has a constructor. Then I'm declaring another class, I name it French person, and I use the keyword extends, which inherit from person. So here the constructor of French person would take two parameters. So to execute the parent's constructor, I should use the keyword super. Then I pass age, and then here I'm using another code which is special for constructor for French person. Then it has a special method named language, which is a method specially only for French person. So French person also would inherit the method age. I can also override the age method by writing here a function with the same name, then I can change the code. I write my own code. So in this code here, I have instantiate the person and the French person. So let me run the code and see the result. Okay, great. So you see here, if person is of class French person with two parameters. So if person would have a method age, which is inherited from person, and the method language, which is its own method. Great. Now we reach to the one of the important parts in ECMAScript 6, the arrow function. What is the arrow function? So you see here a classical method. Normally we use it in ECMAScript 5. So a function which return a function with a parameter and it's returning something. Actually, I can retype this function in ECMAScript 6. It will be in one line. Okay, so here, this is the arrow function. It really looks weird, but when you get used to it, you will see it really easy. So the arrow function consists of three parts. The parameter I need to pass, then the flat arrow, then the return value. So in this case here, if I don't use a curly bracket here, if I use a curly bracket, that means this function return void. I'm not returning anything. If I want this function to return a value, I should not put a curly bracket. Also, if I want to pass multiple parameters, I should put them inside a parenthesis, like here. So here I can say age, date, etc. So for multiple parameters, I should put them inside a parenthesis. So this is simply the arrow function. So let me run this code and see. Okay, great. Now, how can I benefit the most from the arrow function? Actually, arrow functions, they are really useful if you want to replace them with callback functions. You see in promises and many other concepts in JavaScript where you need to pass a function inside another function, then the arrow function is the ideal way to replace the classical function. The other place where we can use the arrow function is with the problem with the lexical this. Actually, in ECMAScript 5, there is always a problem with the reference of this. Let me give an example to explain exactly what I mean. So you see here, this is an example in ECMAScript 5. I'm declaring a variable with two properties. It has max and find, where max is equal to 0 and find is a function which take an array, would do a for each and search for the maximum value. So you see any problem with this function? Actually, because here I'm passing a function inside for each, this function, the reference of this function is not the same max finder. It's going to be the global object. The reference, this is referring to global. That's why if we try to print max, we're going to have 0. Let's run and see. Okay, you see here, I'm having 0 because this.max, this here in my case is the global. To fix this, there are many ways in ECMAScript 5. One of these ways is just to tell this object to take a reference of this object. So this here is referring to finder, max finder object. Then I should use it inside the other function, self. So let's try to print out again. You see, now it's giving the correct maximum value. Well, this issue is solved with the arrow function. So here again, now the function passed to the for each is an arrow function, and because of this here is referring to this object max finder and not to global. So let me print to execute this function and see. Again, it's giving the correct value 4. Now, how to pass default parameters in ECMAScript 6? Usually we used in ECMAScript 5 to pass default value for functions, default values for parameters in functions by saying size equal to size or some value, name here equal to name or and another value. So the default values for these parameters is going to be 10 or the text Rashid. Well, actually, first of all, we should confess that this method is really not clear because the default values are inside the code. The other thing is it's not works for all values. Like, let's give an example. If we execute this function with values 0 and empty string, let's run and see. So you see here, it did not take, in that case, 0 and empty string. And this is because the or here, 0 or 10, it would take 10. So in some cases, I'm getting some error. Not getting the correct default, I'm not getting the passed value. So in ECMAScript 6, I can easily pass a default value just by naming the parameter and give it right away equal then the default value. So in that case, let's run. So you see here, I get the default values if I pass, when I pass no parameters, and then I get even the kind of weird values, let's say like 0 or empty string. The default value I can pass, it also could be a variable, like let's say page. It could be a function. I pass here a function as a default value, like get name, something like this. Cool. Okay, finally we reached to the last concept in this lecture. I want to talk a little bit about the two new two classes available in ECMAScript 6. It's maps and set. So what's map and sets? They are kind of collections, like similar to dictionaries. The thing here, maps, is just kind of table with the keys. So it has keys assigned to objects, and they are provided with tools to do searching and for adding variables, to adding new elements. So let's say I'm having 3 variables, user 1, 2, 3 of objects that has 2 properties. Then a user, which is an instance of map, then to add a new element to the map, I can use the set. Then here I pass a key, then the name of, and then the variable. Then to search for a variable, to search for an object inside that map, I can use the method has, which return true, false, according to the key if it's available or not. Then to get an element inside that map, I can use the method get, and then to delete one of the elements from it, I'd say delete, then I pass a key. The other concept is the set. The set is kind of similar to maps, but it does not have a key. So here it has a collection of objects without a keys. So similarly, I have 3 objects. Then here I'm declaring an instance of set. Then instead of saying set, I say add. So to add a new element, I say add user1, user2, user3, and I don't need to pass a key. Then to search for an object, I use has. I also can iterate it. So I say for let user of users, and this will make a copy of each entity. Then it will iterate that object and print it out. Okay, we reached the end of this presentation. I hope it was useful for those who are beginners for ECMAScript 6. ECMAScript 6 is much more complex than that. It's just the thin layer of what ECMAScript really is, but it should be good enough as a start for those who want to build some mobile applications for native scripts using the vanilla JavaScript. Okay, thank you for listening, and see you in next lecture.